What does this do?
It's the microphone.
Oh, my criminy.
Where were you born?
I was born at the Tascadero General Hospital
in Seattle, Washington.
Bakersfield, California.
I was born at Mrs. Weideman's maternity home in Paso Robles, California.
We lived in Paso Robles on 46 in Arbor. I was born in Atascadero. That was the nearest hospital at the time.
What year were you born?
1938.
1943.
1938.
1940.
1945.
What brought your family to Paso Robles?
Our family homesteaded here in 1860.
Dad's parents came from Germany in 1886.
My dad's side of the family were Mennonites. My mother's side were Methodists.
My dad was stationed out at Camp Roberts during the Second World War.
When they got here, they were looking for Orangi, and nobody knew what that meant. They meant Orange, California, and that's where they got married.
My mother's family goes back to the founding fathers. My father's family were Mennonites that came back in the 1880s, 90s, persecuted, and then allowed to be free when they came to this country.
My mother had 5 of us kids at home during the war, and he told her it didn't rain 9 months out of the year here. And so July of 1946, we were living in Oak Park in Paso Robles.
And I always say I didn't get far in life. I ended up marrying the neighbors. I moved about 1.5 miles from my childhood home to my new home when I was married.
My wife was 5th generation here and growing up, and I learned a lot about her family. You don't start talking about anybody because there's tons of relatives around you didn't know you had. Father-in-law was the stonemason for the Madonna Inn and Mission Plaza in San Luis. Fairgrounds, he built the gates and all the stonework there. Pretty proud of the fact that, they were pretty cool guys.
How would you describe your childhood?
I had a wonderful childhood.
Very good. Lots of fun.
Oh, wow.
Great.
Oh, I had a very happy childhood.
I had a mother that was widowed at 32 with 3 small children. I was the oldest. From day one, always provided a roof over our heads and food on the table.
This town was a super town to grow up in. It was a small town then, of course, only around 4,800 people.
We played with the Ernst brothers and a couple of the other families.
We had 6 grades in one schoolhouse. I started with 1st grade, so there was no preschool or no kindergarten. We didn't need it in those days. We just did chores with our parents outside, and it was a good life.
I had 1 brother and 2 sisters, and we lived 16 miles out of town.
Almost every day if our dad was out in the field, we would take coffee and cookies about 4 o'clock out to my dad and uncle. It was a Danish tradition.
There, and we ran around barefooted. And
Of course, we played war.
You could be running around all day long and having a good time.
it was a big treat if we heard somebody coming up the road to our house because we never got anybody to come see us. We lived so far away.
People didn't worry about their kids and where they were going or what they were doing.
So different than now.
We could run around and do whatever we wanted. We had a wonderful childhood.
The only criteria was be home by dinner time, but you couldn't get in too much trouble.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Well, mostly boys, but mostly. And then I didn't like history at all. And here I am working in Carnegie and loving it. And I like it now, but my special class that I kind of liked was speech class. And we could do a extemporaneous speech. And so I could say whatever I wanted. And that's the kind of speech I like to give.
I loved spelling, I think, in grammar school, and I liked math. I was salutatorian of my graduating class in San Miguel.
Believe it or not, my favorite subject was algebra.
Mechanics, and my dad was a metallurgist. He studied metallurgy in college. So as a child, I worked in the radiator shop when I was quite young with my dad, repairing radiators. And then we got into repairing cars. And from there, I got into auto racing. He used to build cooling systems for Indianapolis race cars. So that's what started my initial fascination with international auto racing.
History was my favorite subject. I love history. I like reading books, historical novels, and just historical stories of people who were with us a long time ago. I think it's really important the way you look at that, and then you see how, for instance, Paso Robles, how much has changed and how much you see that you really like, and then some things you don't quite care for, but you live with it. And I'm glad I, got here when I did to see all the things, the changes, and it's been pretty amazing.
What do you remember about World War II?
Kids at that time were very taken up by the war until it was over. That was the biggest thing in our mind was Second World War.
One thing that was vivid in my memory was the air raid sirens, and then I guess the fire department would open up all the hydrants and flood the streets to make it look like it was water instead of a city.
Several of my uncles went to war. My father was not one of them. He had a hearing problem, so he was medically excused, I guess.
My uncles coming back that served in war, and they brought back P-38 Luger that had swastikas on it, and we played out in the dirt with it. Of course, they didn't give us ammunition.
We got stamps, though, and everything was rationed, and we couldn't hardly buy gasoline or tires.
There was rationing of sugar, rubber tires, too. There was a certain allotment for that.
My uncle's ship, he was in the Navy on an aircraft carrier, the USS Bunker Hill. Kamikazes hit it at the Battle of Okinawa. They brought the ship back to Bremerton Navy Yard. My mother and my grandmother took us kids down to see the ship that Uncle Al was on. And I, as a kid, I still can't believe it. It looked like a floating junkyard. It was damaged that bad.
And we practiced digging foxholes, and of course we had helmets and all the things that little kids do.
The blackout curtains that you had to put down, and if any light got out, somebody came and knocked on your door.
It was hard because they had no elastic, no rubber, pull-up rubber panties. So when I was in diapers, I was always wetting the bed, I guess, and they had nothing to protect. So everything got wet. So that would be a pain.
One of them brought a bazooka back. We had a bazooka that was empty. My older brother figured a way to propel it, and we launched it from a bicycle with carbide down 12th Street, playing war with the neighbor kids. And of course, it didn't do anything significant, but I can remember riding the bicycle and touching it off, sending it up 12th Street about 3 blocks.
I kind of remember about sitting by a big old radio and listening that it was finally going to be over.
During the war years, the farmers couldn't get metal or repairs or replacement parts for any of their harvesters or tractors. So my dad decided to stop farming and go into the repair business, repairing radiators and cooling systems on automotive and agricultural and industrial.
During the war, he went to work at Boeing Aircraft Company and painted camouflage on the roofs of all the buildings. He did that up until he was drafted. They didn't draft guys with 5 kids unless they had to, but right toward at 44, I guess it was the Battle of the Bulge, they needed more men, and so he did get drafted. Luckily, he got sent out to Camp Roberts for his basic training, which he enjoyed. He was telling me about collecting tarantulas and stirring them up in a helmet and watching them fight. That was very entertaining, I guess.
What do you recall about the day President Kennedy was assassinated?
I remember I was vacuuming and I had the TV on and I just went to my knees and goes, what in the world's happening in this world? What in the world is that really happening? And it was too hard to understand it in those days. And now all you hear is shooting and people killing all the time. To me, it didn't make sense whatsoever. I was shocked.
Oh my goodness. I was attending junior college in Bakersfield, California. And actually we were having lunch when everyone started screaming and hollering. And since I wasn't in front of the television, I searched it out and found out what had happened. Oh, devastated. I mean, regardless of party affiliation, he was a wonderful human being. He did so much for our country. It was just a tragic, tragic thing to have happened.
I'll never forget that. We were fighting a fire up at the old Hot Springs Hotel. The fire started at about 2 or 3 in the morning. We're on what we called a monitor, directing water into the third floor. And Bill Dirks, who was a news reporter for KPRL and that, was stopping by to talk to us. And someone ran up and told him that something bad had happened. Anyway, then he turned around and said he had to go, that Kennedy had been shot. And it was a stunner. You just didn't think things like that happened. But unfortunately, they did. And it was pretty traumatic, really.
I was folding diapers on the floor and just couldn't get away from the TV of watching how traumatic that was.
Everybody kind of stopped and was pretty much speechless for a period of time, trying to figure out how it was going to impact our country.
Did you watch the moon landing?
Oh, yes, I did watch it as everyone else. It was phenomenal. It was something I never thought would ever happen. I watched every single second, and the minute he actually landed, it was just amazing.
I do remember watching it.
I think the whole world watched that time, and it was pretty exciting to all of us. It was a very significant event to think that we could get as far away as something that was, that distant to us.
I was sitting there watching it on TV, and it was making me feel seasick as they were bobbing up and down in the ocean. I thought, man, this is kind of making me sick. But then I didn't realize that we've never done it since, really. So it was quite an experience, really. Yeah.
So we were over at my mother and father-in-law's for dinner. Dinner had to wait. We all had to sit and watch that. But it was pretty awesome. And my daughters, they weren't quite as impressed, I don't think, as I was. This was something I think those kids were starting to live with. But yeah, it was pretty awesome. Yeah, made you feel pretty good.
What world events have changed or impacted you most?
When Camp Roberts was going and there was so many soldiers out there, and they had 15,000 soldiers parading, so hot in the summertime that all the guys said they could fry an egg on the on the blacktop or on their car. It was so hot for them, and they would be fainting out in the parade ground and everything. Something like that kind of was important to me in my head.
I think the Vietnam War, to see my classmates having to leave, and there were 2 that we lost, and it really affected so many people. And then to see them return and not to have the people welcome them back the way they should have been, that really impacted me.
There have been so many things that, I've lived through in my lifetime. We've seen the development of aviation and aerospace, and we've gone from being an island in North America to being part of an international community where everything we do is affected worldwide. You can see the major changes taking place on all the continents at once.
The thing I think about now is social media. I think it's probably a great thing, but the problem with it is the way people are using it. Social media to me is, I guess, not the greatest thing that ever happened. I know people disagree with me, but if I didn't have a great-grandson or a grandson, I'd probably be lost with it.
I don't think the electronics has been favorable to the character of people. Electronics have been favorable to the development of technology, but it has a good side and a bad side. This has turned people into very impersonal beings. They can call each other various things at a distance rather than facing eye to eye and addressing their concerns or dislikes or likes.
Do you recall the earthquake in Paso in 2003?
We lived out towards Parkfield, so there was a few things that fell off the shelf at the ranch. My husband's in Bakersfield. His mom lived out at Quail Run, just east of Paso Robles. Oh, she had wine and olive oil and vinegar. Everything just spilled all over. And she lost a lot of china and special dishes that she'd had for 65 years. So that was traumatic. And she just lost a lot of treasures. And I do remember the buildings falling downtown.
It was right before Christmas, December 22nd, 2003. And I was in my house getting ready for Christmas, and I went down the hall and I got a tablecloth out to go put in the dining room. And I go, oh man, we're having an earthquake. And I was walking down the hall, and then I kept walking, and I said, oh man, we're having a real earthquake. But it didn't hurt anything at our house. My kids called me and said, did you hear about downtown? And I couldn't even believe that it was like that downtown.
I was still with the fire department on a part-time basis at that time as a fire marshal. And the building started rocking and rolling. A seismic alert system in the building was going off, and it was screaming, seismic alert, seismic alert, seismic alert. And it was like, no kidding. But this thing was set up to pick up motion in the ground from a long way away, but that earthquake epicenter was close. So it almost hit at the same time as the alert went off. And I left there and was driving down Spring Street and happened to glance down 12th Street here and saw the mess from the clock tower building laying in the street. Major building collapse. I don't know, things were pretty hectic from then on. It was amazing how fast things got out. We were getting calls from England, for instance. Fortunately, we didn't lose more lives than we did.
I was at the end of the block where the earthquake killed one of our employees' wives and a young girl that was inside of the store. Marilyn had walked out and realized that this young girl of 17 was still inside and screaming. So she could have saved her own life by just staying out, but instead she went back in. And that's when the bricks came down and killed both of them.
My wife and my mother were on their way to have lunch with her here in the middle of town. My wife was a block and a half away, and my mother was quite close. I was afraid that they might have been there when I heard where it fell. I saw the water coming up out of the street and the parking lot of the courthouse or the city hall building. A guy had gone out there with a backhoe and was going to start digging, and I warned him that it was not a sewer. He thought it was a broken sewer because of the sulfury smell. I warned him that it was called Spring Street because it was covered with springs, and that if he started digging a hole, he may never find the bottom. That proved to be very true a couple hours later. They went ahead and did it anyway, and it opened up the whole parking lot. There were 2 people killed right across the street from here. A young girl and the wife of one of our salesmen.
What was a pivotal moment in your life?
Probably when I got married really early. Let's see, 18. I had a daughter by 19, and then we had another one when I was a couple years older. So we had 3 daughters altogether, and that made a big pivotal emotional thing in my life.
As I look back, the pivotal moment would have been the death of my father.
Wow. There have been several. When I went to work for Carroll Shelby in 1966 and got involved in auto racing internationally and working with Ford Motor Company, shortly after I went there, Carroll sent me to Detroit to be the liaison between Shelby American and Ford Motor Company back when they had the Ford Ferrari competition.
I was working for my dad then. He is a painting contractor, and we were painting a showroom over on the corner of 13th and Spring for an automobile agency there. And in the process of working, Ralph, one of the owners, asked me if I wouldn't like to put in an application for the volunteer fire department. And I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. And so I did, and they accepted my application. That was in 1962. And I stayed with the fire department until basically 2005.
My husband died of cancer. And so that was, he wasn't sick for a long time. So a month and 3 days, I lost my husband. So that was very traumatic for me. It's very shocking to lose your husband. We'd been married 43 years and had a great life. We always were fortunate enough to be able to travel and did so many wonderful things.
Has travel been important to you?
I used to travel all the time. I'm getting too tired and too old and too stiff and too sore. Hawaii, Alaska, East Coast. I liked every place that I went.
The one that stands out the most to me is Rome. It has so much there to visit the Vatican, to see the Colosseum, and to see Pompeii. Those were the three on my bucket list, and I was able to see all three.
We had a lot of fun traveling. We were in England, France, Ireland, Italy, Alaska, and East Coast, Caribbean. It's really amazing to see how other people live. I remember in England, our first trip there, and going by the butcher shop, and honest to God, it looked like the 1930s here. They were carcasses hanging in the window. Went in and told them what you want. They carved it off, or it might have been cut already, but flies and whatever. There was just, that's the way it was. And so it was a real learning curve. But once we got used to it, it was a lot of fun. And people were so cool. I mean, very nice. I remember we had our grandson and we were headed downtown at a bus stop waiting for the bus. And this gentleman drove up and got out of his car and he said, "Where are you going?" And we said, "We were going downtown in Newmarket." And he looked at us and he says, "Well, put the pushchair in the boot and climb in." He said, "The bus will not be here for." And we said, "Well, really?" "Of course." So we put the stroller in the trunk and got in, and he drove us downtown and let us out and thanked him profusely. And, "Oh, think nothing of it." So, yeah, it was great. And Ireland, I will never forget. Beautiful, and the people were so friendly and fun. You go to these little pubs at night, and the music was loud and fun, and everybody's having a good time. And the history, buildings or things that were thousands of years old. And it just blows your mind. You look at the countryside, the Connemara and up in there, and it's just so desolate. How they scratched a living out of that was just amazing. We ran into an old gentleman who was working on his roof, and Sue insisted we get a picture of it. We stopped and we're talking with him. And he said, "Where are you from?" And we said, "Well, we're from California." "Oh," he says, "it shakes there all the time." I said, "Not really." Asked if he had ever been somewhere or there or another. And he said, No. He said, "I have no need to go anywhere. I've never been anywhere but right here." I said, "You mean you've never been to Dublin or Galway or anything?" "Nope, no reason." And I said, "Your whole life has been right here." "That's right." And he, I'm sure, was well into his 80s and climbing around on his thatch roof doing the patching. Amazing man. I would love talking to him.
Favorite place would be Lake Almanor. That's where we've had homes for the last 48 years. I just finished a trip to Europe, started from Holland, went to Budapest. I was impressed by the cleanliness and the modern rebuilding of parts of Germany and Bavaria and Austria and the various places. It's remarkable how people have recovered from such devastation, because I saw some of it earlier in my life in Italy and Germany. It hadn't been rebuilt yet. So it's incredible to see how it can be rebuilt.
Well, I think traveling is really one of my passions. My husband and I did a lot of that. When the kids were growing up and when they were in high school and grammar school, we were tied down with school, but we always took off and did things, but not big elaborate vacations when our kids were growing up. Plus, we really couldn't afford it in those days. You just stay home and work. And I just loved traveling. Japan was wonderful. South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. I loved Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia. They talk about the American War, and it's what we call the Vietnam War. But the people are so loving.
How have your priorities changed over time?
I learned how to think about others, not just of myself. And I enjoy people a lot more. Well, I have more time too.
I'm more laid back, I hope, more secure in what I want for the rest of my life. I think we've met the goals that we set out, but I'm not a laid back person either. I like to see our children's make the best decisions in their life so that they can also have a good life.
What brings you joy?
Oh, being around my grandchildren. And it's just fun seeing all my grandchildren. I'm blessed to have all my children close by.
Seeing happiness in others.
Just people and family and friends. And I just had lunch with some of my family and friends. Had a good time. Just things like that.
Right now, probably my great grandkids. They're little and fun. You know, the grandkids are unfortunately old kids now, but the great grandkids are still fun. And yeah, I like that. And the nice thing is you get a little tired of them and you send them home. That's the beauty of the grandkids.
Oh, to see our children and their spouses and our grandchildren happy.
What makes you sad?
To see just them unhappy.
Conflict in a family. It makes me very sad when people don't get along. It makes me very, very sad.
Thinking about how my husband was so accomplished and that he lost his life at 68.
What we're doing to this country. You know, people have a tendency to become complacent and disrespectful.
What advice would you give yourself at age 20?
Oh, goodness.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Take better care of yourself. No.
I think to stay with my commitment of finishing college. I just went to junior college and I wish that I would have continued.
Get a little better education.
I probably would have gone after more education.
Learning a little bit more and being a little bit more informed about everything. When you're so busy and you're young and you have kids, you don't have time for anything like that. So I did like to be informed and learn, and I still do.
Work hard in life and it's totally worth it. Live smart.
Set your goals. And we were pretty much carefree and thought, well, everything will work out. My grandkids, I tell them, start saving your money now. Don't wait until you're retired or something, and look to the future.
I was discouraged by the education community at the time. I would have gone into the sciences more, into biology, chemistry, metallurgy, physics. I've always had a strong feeling about development of things, the physical and mechanical things, theories and principles. And I've developed 17 patents in my life.
Happy and not be stressful. At 20 years old, I was pretty much that way. So I just want to be a happy person.
I remember when we had gotten married, I thought, yeah, if I could make $400 a month, we'd be sitting pretty. And now I look and I think $400 isn't going to take 4 people out to dinner.
What is something you've accomplished in life that you feel proud of?
I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my husband. I'm proud of our home that we built. We'll have 24 people there for Christmas, and it's all family.
Was named Cattle Women of the Year in 2015. So that was very nice to be honored by that. Oh, in the Sam McGill Grammar School, they didn't have a good playground. I went out to Camp Roberts and talked to the colonel out there, and I asked how he could help our school. And he came to the school. Then he brought people from Camp Roberts out, and we did this wonderful playground. So I was always happy about getting that done.
I hope that I've done the best job possible for our children in their grounding. I also am happy that I've kept my faith and that I am open to other opinions rather than just my own.
Oh, probably several things that happened while I was on the fire department. Yeah.
Family. Everything else we do is immaterial in time. Family is the only thing that exists beyond our life.
What do you wish you'd spent less time doing?
Probably moping around.
Working.
Probably trying to get people to think the way I think about certain things that are important to me.
Worrying. There's things you can handle and things you can't. And you can't drive yourself crazy worrying about things that you don't have any control over.
I've built companies since I was in my 20s. I've owned 5 major companies, 3 of them international. I'd spend less time today on trying to create wealth and more time on trying to enjoy life.
I don't feel like I need to have as much money as I thought I had to.
What do you wish you'd spent more time doing?
Spending more time with my mother.
Fishing.
Probably with the kids, my kids and grandkids. You get wrapped up in things. You know, I was on the city council for 12 years, and my girls were at a young age then. And there were a lot of things going on that we got involved with, which I don't regret. They were a lot of fun, but sometimes it takes you away from maybe what you should do. So after I got off of that, we did do a lot of things that we had put off. Look at your family and keep things on an even keel.
What is your idea of heaven?
Well, I'm thankful for God having a place to take us, and I know it's a very good place to be, and I'm ready to be there.
Definitely want to be there. I don't think we can possibly conceive what it's going to be like. I don't think that's fathomable for a human being.
Seeing my wife again. Yep.
I believe in God, and there's life after this life here. When you do lose someone close to you, it's a comfort knowing that you're never alone.
A perfect world and seeing my loved ones that I've lost.
How would you like to be remembered by people?
Oh, a happy person, and hope that I help somebody along the way sometime.
You have to live smart to die smart. I think when you get to my age now, you just think you want to plan out so you leave a good path behind you.
I don't think that's significant. I think it's what you do for people when you're alive, not what people remember you for when you're gone. I don't think that's really important once you're gone.
What is your happiest memory?
I think what was the best, it's when I got married and I looked over and my husband was standing with his groomsmen and stuff at the right, and he gave me this big wink, and it just got me. And we're still together 66 years.
As much as I love my husband, I think Susan's birth, our first child. There's nothing like seeing your first child look up at you and know that you are totally responsible for this baby who is so innocent, knows nothing, knows right from wrong. It's just a perfect little child. Yeah, it makes me emotional, but yeah, that's the happiest.
Probably the day I got married, Pete and I had a big Italian wedding. It lasted for 2 days. It was down at the fairgrounds in those days because it was the biggest place to have a wedding.
This is going to sound corny, but when she said yes, I know. Yeah. So that was amazing, and kids born, and you're just amazed that that cute little girl is yours. And then when you have 2 of them, it's twice the fun. And they got along well as they were growing up. So they had to share a bedroom. I got them a phone, their own phone. And their phone number was 238-LOVE. Because I was good friends with the manager here at a telephone company. Yeah, they got a big kick out of that.
Marrying my wife, Louise, birth of my children, probably those would be the most significant. Yeah.
What is something you'd like people to know?
There's always hope for everybody, and don't despair, don't give up. Be happy and communicate and be friendly with other people, and surely it'll bring you happiness too.
Kindness. I wish that people were kinder to one another.
To keep their faith.
I just think that hard work gets you somewhere. People used to tell my husband, you're so lucky. And he always would say the definition of luck is hard work. Be responsible for your children. If you have children, you need to work hard so you can provide an education for them, not expect a free handout or expect them to pay for their own education. Although I think children definitely should work through their college years. And I think it's good if you have too much to share and give back to the community.
Treat others like you'd like to be treated. And look at the bright side. Don't look at the dark side. Everybody's worth knowing. And they all got something that they could probably pass on to you that you might like. There's just not enough love in the world, so to speak.